So let's define what novel is. Well, before we jump into the history of European fiction, we have to understand what we mean by novel. Now, for a layman nowadays, when we talk about literature, novel is the most dominant form of literature. It's synonymous with novel. Most people barely read poetry or view drama, but everyone has at least read one novel in their lifetime. So novel has become the most dominant, most powerful art form, most important form of literature, basically. So much so, novel is compared to what epic was in the classical age. So in fact, we call novel as the epic of our modern age. Novel is as important or even more important than how epic was in the ancient times. And in fact, novel also has a rather unusual nickname. It's called the burger epic. It's the fast food version of epic. Not that much sophisticated or as great as epic, but even more powerful than epic. Curiously, it's called burger epic because this is an art form that is primarily by the middle class, for the middle class, and written about the middle class. Now, Ralph Waldo rightly calls novel the most important gift of the capitalist civilization to the world, because the birth of novel is directly connected to the rise of the middle class. Like I said, novel is all about the middle class, written for an audience. It is primarily the middle class. I believe you have heard the definition of novel. Let's talk about how we define novel and how it's different from the romance. Okay? ശരി. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് നോവൽ ഡിഫൈൻ ചെയ്തു. ഇനി പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ because there is postmodern novel which breaks every rule of novel, we can't exactly say this is what novel is about. Any prose fiction with a story and a plot cannot be basically novel. For example, think Moti Yadav, Thomas Mallory, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ Arcadia by Philip Sidney. Both are prose fiction, both are in prose, and both are stories with characters, but there is a crucial difference. See, prose fiction രണ്ട് രീതിയിലാകാം, broad ആയിട്ട്. It could be a romance or it could be a novel. The crucial difference is that romance is highly chivalric. Medieval കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്ന നോവലിന്റെ forefathers ആണ് romance. So romance usually has chivalric heroes, going off to fight, adventures, trying to rescue damsels in distress, like Arthurian romances. So basically, romance shows an idealized version of world with idealized characters, chivalric characters. So this kind of work has absolutely no relation to reality. And herein comes the difference between romance and novel. So novel is a picture of real life and manner. Novel is an element of healthy dose of realism, unlike romance, which is all about things that is never going to happen. So romance is all about princes and princesses, a perfect princess and perfect princess going on an adventure in a chivalric never ever land. This is not going to happen in real life. Romance is all about escape, all about chivalry. Well, novel is all about reality, and herein lies the crucial difference. Romance was written in the medieval age for a primarily upper class audience. Now, after 16th, 17th, 18th century, after Renaissance, after 16th, 17th, 18th century, the audience has changed. You have a rising middle class, a rising powerful bourgeoisie who has money to buy books, who has time to read books, and who refuses to read chivalric romance, because chivalric romance are connect ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. They wanted something they could relate to. They wanted to read about their own world, and this is how romance transitions to novel. The novel is all about real life and real manners and about real people, while as romance is all about an idealistic chivalrous world where there is not even a single dose of reality. That's the crucial difference. Okay, so basically, it's the change in audience that gave birth to novel. As centuries changed, literature, percolated down to common people. So, the medieval age and the Renaissance were a major change around. So, we look into Renaissance, the birth of modern fiction. ശരിക്കും modern fiction ജനിക്കുന്നത് Renaissance മുതലാണ്. So let's look into what Renaissance. I'm sure you know what Renaissance is, but uh, you know, just for namesake, just look into Renaissance. So what is exactly Renaissance? Basically, Renaissance is a movement, an age of rebirth, rediscovery എന്നൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് പറയാം. From 1350 to 1600 approximately. See, Renaissance ഒറ്റ വാക്ക് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ it's called rebirth, a rediscovery. എന്തിന്റെ rebirth? Of classical work, of Greek, Roman, artistic, philosophical and intellectual progress. നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു പോയ പഴയ വർക്കിന്റെ ഒരു rebirth ആണ്. Renaissance is a break from the medieval age. From the medieval, not just medieval age, but the medieval values, medieval style, and medieval way of looking at things. Renaissance involves rediscovering of old classical way of looking at things. Renaissance also involves incorporating that classical way and creating something new. Okay, so church-centered ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു medieval laws completely മാറി ഒരു പുതിയ, it's a new way of looking at things thanks to classical Greek and Roman work. Okay, and the ഏറ്റവും the biggest, the greatest contribution of Renaissance was the development and spread of something called humanism. Now, what exactly is humanism? Humanism was triggered by the rediscovery of humanity, classical works of antiquity. So basically, humanism involves the philosophy. Perivole തന്നെ humanism is all about celebrating being a human being. So unlike what medieval church told you that being human, born in earth is just a transit to the actual life. ഈ ലൈഫ് ഒന്നുമല്ല, ആഫ്റ്റർ ലൈഫ് ആണല്ല എന്ന ചർച്ചിന്റെ വിശ്വാസത്തിൽ നിന്ന് മാറി humanism taught people to celebrate being human, to enjoy being human. Okay. So let's go to 14th century Italy, the birthplace of romance. Now, when we talk about Renaissance, നമ്മൾ ആദ്യം വരുന്ന ഒരു പേരാണ് Italy. It's the birthplace of Renaissance. But why Italy? ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഉണ്ട്. എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ഇറ്റലിയിൽ റെനസാൻസ് ജനിച്ചു? One sec. Okay, so let's talk about the birthplace of Renaissance, Italy. Now, there are a number of reasons why Renaissance was born in Italy and not in France or Germany or England or any other European country or Asian country for that matter. See, by some happy luck, Italy had all the requirements for the birth of Renaissance. Number one, Italy was the center of global trade. Okay, and as you know, trade means not just give and take of give and take of objects, but also give and take of ideas. So, as a center of global trade, Italy was connected globally to other places, other countries, and also ideas from the countries. Being trading places, Italy was actually a series of city-states. Monarchy അല്ല, kings ഭരിക്കുന്ന രാജ്യങ്ങളല്ല, പകരം city-states. City-states blessed with rich and elite urban mercantile class, merchant class. അപ്പോൾ city-states ഭരിക്കുന്നത് രാജാവും റാണിയൊന്നും അല്ല, merchant class ആണ്. A very wealthy urban merchant class, trading class. This is probably why churchill in the Mari സെക്യുലറിസം, റെനസാൻസിന് വേണ്ടിയുള്ള സെക്യുലർ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ആദ്യം ഉണ്ടാകുന്നതും ഇറ്റലിയിലാണ്. കാരണം for trading, you will need banking, you will need accounting, you will need science, you will need mathematics, you need to learn languages. So you need to, step away from church, step away from Bible, step away from Latin, and be practical. Live in this moment. Be secular. And this is how Renaissance was born in Italy. So Italy was basically a series of city-states, very rich urban city-states, ruled by noble families like the Medici of the Florence. Italy had the perfect location, and finally, Italy had access to the classical heritage of Greece and Rome. Uh, Now, like I said, ഇതെല്ലാ എല്ലാ socio-political കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റും പെർഫെക്റ്റ്ലി മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ എല്ലാ ലക്ഷണങ്ങളും മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോഴാണ് ഇറ്റലിയിൽ ഒരു Renaissance. So Italy was the one place which was globally connected, which had a rich and powerful mercantile class, which was comparatively free from church, which no, which was a place where ideas would circulate, which was a place for experimenting and playing with new ideas and new thoughts. അതിലൊന്നാണ് humanism. The belief that human experience on earth is not just a test to pass whether you could go to hell or heaven, but an experience that is worth in itself. So throughout the Middle Ages, earthly life was considered just a test to get to heaven. Other than the Mare, humanism starts to celebrate beauty, the perfect man, the perfect human, to celebrate being alive, to celebrate being on earth. So, art, literature, everything that was previously devoted to church starts to devote more energy to understanding life, appreciating life, and celebrating life. Another key plus about Italy was that key city states the ruling families, the noble families, the merchant class families were also wealthy patrons. Now, patrons, നമ്മളൊക്കെ പഴയ നാട്ടില് തറവാട്ട് മഹിമ കാണിക്കാൻ ആനയെ വാങ്ങി ഫ്രണ്ട് നിർത്തുന്നത് പോലെ എത്ര ആനയുണ്ടോ അത്രയും തറവാട്ട് മഹിമ കാണിച്ചെന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെ patrons showed off their status by sponsoring artists. The most successful, most famous the artist is, the greater the prestige in commissioning their work. And in particular, you have to mention the Medici family of Florence. So, Italian city states like ഏറ്റവും മുന്നിട്ട് നിൽക്കുന്ന states ആണ് Florence. Most powerful, most wealthiest states are Florence, Genoa, Milan, Venice, and of course the papal states like Rome. ഇതിൽ ഏറ്റവും മുന്നിട്ട് നിൽക്കുന്നതാണ് ഫ്ലോറൻസിലെ മെഡിച്ചി ഫാമിലി, especially Lorenzo the Magnificent, because he was also the patron of some of the greatest maestros of Renaissance, like Michelangelo and Botticelli and Leonardo da Vinci. And you think Renaissance, you think the Holy Trinity of Renaissance, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael, but Renaissance bloomed in all kinds of disciplines, particularly in art, in culture, architecture, painting, and literature. So, എല്ലാം കൊണ്ടും ഒരു blooming period ആയിരുന്നു Renaissance. Okay. Also, when you talk about Renaissance, another key element is the discovery of the printing, invention of the printing by Johann Gutenberg around 1439. So, printing press is one of those invention of printing press is one of those monumental moments in human history. And printing press is going to unleash a revolution, a communication revolution that's going to change the world, and that is continuing to change the world even today. So what printing press did was it made printing easy, it made books faster and cheaper. So writers like medieval writers like Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli or Boccaccio could get their books published and printed. So printing pressന്റെ ഒരുപാട് ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസസ് ഉണ്ട്. അതിൽ ഒരു key influence, books became a lot cheaper and available. for writers കുറച്ചുകൂടി ഒരു ഇൻസെന്റീവ് കിട്ടി എന്ന് മാത്രമല്ല, it slowly started to change the audience. അതുവരെ literature was by the aristocrats for the aristocrats. They'll write and they'll read. And the books were largely, the libraries were largely maintaining monastery. അവിടെ നിന്ന് മാറി common people കയ്യിലോട്ട് literature, art, പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ എത്തുന്നതിന്റെ first step ആയിരുന്നു discovery of printing press. And in particular, I have to mention the Gutenberg Bible, the very first printed Bible. And in doing so, he set off not just communication revolution, but also reformation. And in doing so, it led to Bible being the center of Christianity, not the church. It effectively led to the weakening of church and reformation, and you all know the history. So, this is a crucial example of how the invention of something changed human history. It set off a communication revolution, where communication information is going to get cheaper and faster and more available to ordinary people. So, now this is all closely connected to rise and growth of European fiction. Let's see how. So, like I said, even before the birth of printing press, the birth of Renaissance, we already have prose romances, medieval romances, chivalric romances. Before the birth of fiction, you have these chivalric romances, epic poetry, didactic poems, sentimental stories, prose fiction, sonnets, but all mostly written by aristocrats for an aristocratic audience. But after Renaissance, things are going to change. There is increased trade and commerce. Italy മാത്രമല്ല ലോകമെമ്പാടും. We have an increasingly more powerful, getting more richer merchant class, and it's thanks to these trading communities that we have the very first modern story. Okay. And how does modern stories differ from medieval romance? The medieval romance was an idealized world. കാര്യങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെയാകണം എന്ന് മാത്രം കാണിക്കുന്ന ഒരു abstract, idealized world. But the trading community, the merchant class, they wanted something particular, something they could relate to, something much more individualistic. And this will give rise to, eventually give rise to modern fiction. So Renaissance was the key element in the birth of European fiction. And Renaissance കൂടെയാണ് trade കൂടുന്നു, commerce കൂടുന്നു. You have the rise of a new merchant class that is going to rise above their station. People who have money other than the aristocrats, people who demand entertainment, who demand their kind of entertainment. And chivalric romance is slowly going to get outdated. ഒരു പുതിയ kind of modern sensibility ഉള്ള ഒരു പുതിയ audience, and they demand new kind of work, which will give us the European fiction. So, in this class, നമ്മൾ ഓരോന്നായിട്ട് നോക്കാൻ പോവാണ്. How did novel emerge? The modern novel emerge. One sec. Okay, so you have to have a very detailed study of your entire module is about a detailed study of the emergence of fiction. So we are going to take a detailed study of this. We talked about Renaissance, how Renaissance created this modern sensibility and a modern audience, somewhat modern audience, and we look into the crucial texts and writers that transition, that helps literature transition from romance and chivalry to modern fiction that we see as it is. അതിനിടയ്ക്ക് വരുന്ന ചില important writers and works from the book. And the very first work is Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, a classical Italian text. I'm sure you're familiar with the text. This is a work published in 14th century by an Italian writer, Giovanni Boccaccio. Now, interestingly, Boccaccio himself was a merchant. So his father was a merchant, and the father initiated the son to be a merchant. Boccaccio wanted to be a writer. He loved to write. Went to university. But due to circumstances, he was forced to become a merchant. But eventually, he enjoyed being a merchant. അതിനിടയിലാണ് he wrote this book, which is very monumental in the history of English literature. Sorry, European literature. You know why? Because our transition, Renaissance കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ, there is this transition from romance to modern fiction. Our transition perfectly captured in the work of Decameron. You can see a mixture of both in Decameron. Now, Decameron is a prose fiction. It happens in 14th century Florence. So, just there is plague going on 1348. There is plague going on, blackness going on in Florence, right and left. So, ഈ plague നിന്ന് രക്ഷപ്പെടാനായിട്ട് 10 people, 7 ladies and 3 gentlemen, they decide to escape to the country estate. അപ്പോൾ അവിടെ പോയി seclusionൽ താമസിക്കുന്നു. So you have 10 people living in a country estate, and to while away their time, they decide to entertain each other. And how do you do that? They didn't have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, so they decided to tell a story, the good old-fashioned way. So each day, one person will be selected as a king or a queen, and they'll get to choose what the story is about. And oru thread of the story. So 10 people, 10 stories. Altogether, we have 100 stories. So there is a frame story. It's a collection of 100 stories. Okay. Now you can see how this must have influenced many other classes, in particular Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Decameron important topic it's the stories that are interesting. See, the frame story is in a very idealized setting. 7 ladies and 3 gents in a very idealized setting of a country estate. They sing and they dance and they pick flowers and they, basically behave like chivalric princes and princesses. Fine. But when it comes to the stories, it's an entirely different matter. That's entirely different because half of the stories, or more than half of the stories, are about ordinary people, common people going on with about daily life. ഈ ഒരു എലമെന്റ് ഓഫ് റിയലിസം ആദ്യമായിട്ട് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നത് ഡെക്കാമറോണിലെ Boccaccio. So there are stories about princes and princesses and idealistic stories alone, but majority of the stories have a healthy dose of realism. You find ordinary people, egoistic, angry, lusty, wily, cunning, trying to go on with their life. You have husbands trying to cheat on their wives, wives trying to cheat on their husbands, lovers trying to cheat on their parents. Basically, everybody is just trying to have a good time, and there's a good amount of raw earthiness about this movie. Interestingly, this book is considered one of the dirtiest medieval books. Pretty obscene on the parayaronde, but that's what makes this book so important. An idealist medievalist in the pakkarathotte poi, there is an element of realism and earthiness to the story, and that's what makes this book so interesting. So this is the first book that shows signs of change, that shows that time has changed, fiction is evolving, realism has slowly started to replace romance. In the European fiction history, it's a battle, a fight between romance and realism. Medieval romance was basically just that, romance. Then realism starts to creep in one by one, step by step. The last step is Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. So you have these lusty men. I have to talk about the women in Decameron because, despite being written in the medieval age, these are some of the most empowered, most interesting women that I've ever seen. There are women who rightly demand that I have every right to take a lover because my husband refuses to look at me. Refuses to, he neglects me. It's my right to take him a lover. We have, very strong, realistic characters and interesting stories thanks to the realism. So, uh, the Renaissance brings about a transition from medieval to modern fiction. ആ ട്രാൻസിഷന്റെ ഏറ്റവും ആദ്യത്തെ ആളാണ് Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Now, clearly, this is considered the first pointing towards modern novel. Modern novel ലോട്ടുള്ള ആദ്യത്തെ ചുവടാണ്. അപ്പൊ ഐഡിയലിസം വിട്ട് റിയലിസ്റ്റിലോട്ട് അബ്സ്ട്രാക്ട് വിട്ട് കോൺക്രീറ്റിലോട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ചുവടുവെപ്പായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് Decameron കാണാം. Another element is another significant step is the publication of personal essays by Montaigne, French writer Montaigne. This is also important. If you have studied Bacon, just compare between the writing styles of Bacon and Montaigne. Bacon is highly impersonal, വളരെ abstract ideas തരുന്നൊരാളാണെങ്കിൽ Montaigne is a lot more personal. Montaigne is concerned about an individual, what an individual thinks, his experiences. So again, much more realistic and inward looking. The next key step in the birth of European fiction, we will move from Italy to Spain and to a particular, one of the most celebrated books in Spanish, La Celestina by Fernando de Ruria. Now, again, pretty interesting book. One cannot call it a novel per se, karanam, this is entirely in dialogue form. Okay, 16, originally it had 16 acts. We need a further addition to 22 acts. So, 16 acts are the entirely conversation mode of the prose on comedy of Callisto, tragic comedy of Callisto and Melibea, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ La Celestina. Okay, written by Fernando de Ruria. Boccaccio, Fernando de Ruria was also a common man, a merchant. So this is, like I said, a very special book. In the beginning, a typical chivalric romance mode on തുടങ്ങുന്നത്. You have a very wealthy man, Callisto, who wants to seduce this girl, Melibea. So it's about, you'll think that this is about a romance between two upper class people, but as you read on further, the focus is not on this romance between Callisto and Melibea, but the focus is on the eponymous heroine. It's not the story of Callisto and Melibea, it's the story of Celestina. Now, if you look at the picture, you can see that Melibea is this young, beautiful girl in the middle, and Callisto is the guy on the other side, trying to seduce her. But this work is all about Celestina, the old woman, on the other side. Now, Celestina is nothing like a heroine. She's old, she's grumpy, she's very cunning. She's trying to earn money by helping Callisto seduce Melibea, and later she tries to cheat to get as much money as she can. But it's not the idealistic Callisto or Melibea, but it's Celestina, the rough, down-to-earth, very ordinary Celestina. Actually, the lower class Celestina and other lower class characters that capture her. So this is not a story about how two aristocrats fall in love or they conduct an affair. This is about all these servants to help that affair. So usually chivalric romance sidekick ആയിട്ടുള്ള കഥാപാത്രങ്ങളാണ് ഇതിലെ മെയിൻ കഥാപാത്രങ്ങൾ. Story is not about the hero and heroine falling in love, പകരം അവരെ ഹെൽപ്പ് ചെയ്യുന്ന കൂട്ടാളിയായിട്ടുള്ള Celestina എന്ന ഓൾഡ് വുമൺ ആണ് ഇതിലെ സെൻട്രൽ ക്യാരക്ടർ. ആൻഡ് ഹെർ ബാൻഡ് ഓഫ് സെർവൻസ്, ഇവരെ ഈ ലോർഡിന്റെയും ലേഡിയുടെയും പ്ലഷറിനിടയ്ക്ക് 4 കാശുണ്ടാക്കാൻ നടക്കുന്ന അവരുടെ സെർവൻസ്. Downtown Abbey പറയുന്നത്, it's not the upstairs family, but the downstairs of servants which captivate and make this book so interesting. Again, a key step. Decameronlode Boccaccio introduces the concept that ordinary people with their ordinary life can also be fun and interesting. Actually, even more fun and interesting. അതേ സ്റ്റെപ്പ് തന്നെയാണ് ഫെർണാണ്ടോ ഡെ റോയ ലൈ സെലസ്റ്റീനയിലൂടെ കാണിക്കുന്നത്. So, again, it has a combination of romance and realism. But what makes this book interesting is this romance. So it's this realism, not romance. It's Celestina who comes off as much more lively and alive and interesting. not Callisto or Melania. So this is considered the very first European novel. And when you discuss fiction, ഏറ്റവും ആദ്യം ജനിക്കുന്നത് പിക്കാറസ് നോവൽ. I'm sure you're familiar with what Picaro's novel is, but just in case, Picaro's novel is an opposite, a complete opposite of prose romance. This is not about princess or kings or knights. Picaro's novel is about a Picaro, a rose, a lower class person, uh, an anti-hero, if you may. Somebody who's trying to make his living by hook or crook. If it means by cheating, by stealing, any way he can. He earns his bread whichever way he can. This is I'd say somebody, an anti-hero who has no morals, who tries to cheat to earn his living. And in doing so, we have a lower class hero set in a lower class context, going on with his adventure. Now, nothing can be more realistic than a Picaresque novel. And by 1554, we have the very first Picaresque novel, La Salloreton, again a Spanish novel. Okay. Now, this novel is going to have a tremendous impact across the continent. It's going to inspire our own Henry Fielding to write Picaresque novels, and so on and so forth. So, again, last one of the Thompson importance and the shift, you can see that shift from romance to realism, from upper class heroes, from the knights in shining armor and the dancers in distress. The novel has shifted, the focus has shifted to ordinary people, to street urchins, to rogues. Okay, so Picaresque novel made that possible. You have a low-class hero going on with his happy life. Examples for Picaresque novels will include, we'll discuss Picaresque novel in detail, but think Huckleberry Finn or Tom Jones, the lovable rascals or nasty rascals out there to earn a living. We have covered the basic steps. Now we have come to two giants, the two writers who changed fiction forever, who laid all the groundwork, who laid all the essential groundwork for writing fiction. One of them is Francois Rabelais, who wrote the French writer who wrote Gargantua and Pantagruel, the two most beloved giants in literary history. Now, we have to discuss two important writers. One is Francois Rabelais, another is Cervantes, who wrote Don Quixote. They both have a common feature. ഇവർ രണ്ടുപേരും എഴുതിയ വർക്ക്സ് മോണിമെന്റൽ ആണെന്ന് മാത്രമല്ല, they basically killed romance through their work. So these two works are instrumental in the death of romance and the birth of modern fiction. റൊമാൻസിന്റെ എല്ലാ കെടുകാര്യതകളും എല്ലാ illusions break ചെയ്യുന്ന രണ്ട് വർക്ക്സ് ആണ് Francois Rabelais' Gargantua and Pantagruel, as well as Don Quixote by Cervantes. So we'll look into both. The first, the Gargantua and Pantagruel by Francois Rabelais. So this is the book which is basically a satire on the corrupt clergy, the nobles, the lawyers. അങ്ങനെ എല്ലാവരെയും satirize ചെയ്തൊരു വർക്കാണ്. ബട്ട് satirize ചെയ്യാൻ അവർ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത് രണ്ട് കഥാപാത്രങ്ങളാണ്, a father and son duo, Gargantua and his son Pantagruel. Now, father and son മാത്രമല്ല, they're also extremely big giants. Powerlude, he introduces an element previously unknown in literature. A concept, not just realism, but grotesque realism. A celebration of everything that is body and grotesque, everything about it. So, this is a complete opposite of chivalry and its idealism. Perfectly beautiful heroines with their flowing golden hair, അതുപോലെ the perfect heroes in their perfect poses going on. The perfect laws in the mind. This is a very earthy body world. You have two characters whose urine is basically a river that drowns people, who fart so big that living beings are born out of their fart. അങ്ങനെ ഹ്യൂമൻ ബോഡിയുടെ എല്ലാ ഗ്രോട്ടസ്നെസ്സും എല്ലാ എർത്തിനെസ്സും അതുപോലെ എക്സാഗ്രേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു നോവലാണ് ഡാവിഞ്ചി ആൻഡ് പാച്ചക്രിത. So it's so monumentous. You even have an adjective, rebellious എന്ന് പറയാറുണ്ട്, which have been body, cause, earthy, lusty, raunchy, everything that is absurd and alive about being a human. This is the complete opposite of idealizing the human body or human existence. I think everyone is familiar with this one, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. A very seminal work. Now, Rabelais in the extreme grotesque humorism, but this is a very funny parody of chivalric romance and also the first modern novel. Okay, so and I think you might be familiar with the story, but just in case we talk about it. So Cervantes introduces this old man. Chivalry, the complete opposite. So instead of a very young, handsome prince, you have an old man. Somebody who reads so many romance novels, so many chivalric romance novels that he has lost his touch of reality. You have the 60-year-old man who has read all the romance novels, is completely delusional, who confuses romance for reality. And he decides to go out and have an adventure of his own. He goes out with his dilapidated armory to go and have an adventure of his own. And boy, does he have an adventure. He, at the end of the novel, he comes back defeated, but he is much wiser. He realizes that romance is something that you only see in books, and reality is something you will see outside of your book. So this again is a literal and metaphorical clash of romance and reality. And if novel the jananam or transition paye romance fiction, chivalric romance in reality ഒരു പ്രോസസ്സാണ് the birth of modern romance. അതിന് ഏറ്റവും നല്ല എക്സാമ്പിൾ ആണ് ഡോൺ കിഹോട്ടെ ബൈ സെർവാന്റീസ്. സോ റൊമാൻസ് നോവലുകൾ വായിച്ച് delusional ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു hero. That's our Don Quixote. And he goes off and he faces reality one by one in a series of hilarious adventures. So this is a perfect parody of chivalric romance. And Don Quixote effectively killed romance. So Rabelais and Cervantes, these two are the real founders of novel. By the time we come to Cervantes, it's like 16th century. So medieval feudal world has died out, and we have a new changing world post-Renaissance. A world where there is a rising merchant class, a world where literacy has greatly increased, books are much more available. There is an increasingly hungry audience for newer and newer forms of literature, and a world where chivalry is but a distant past and nobody really cares about chivalry anymore. So a transition കാണാൻ. Okay, അതിന്റെ central features രണ്ട് പേരാണ് Rabelais and Cervantes. Now we'll look into the earliest genres of novel. ജനിക്കുമ്പോഴുണ്ടായിരുന്ന earliest genresലോട്ട് പോവാം before we realize how modern fiction as we know it came to evolve. So, like I said, one of the earliest genres of fiction that formed was Picaresque novel. Originally Spain ജനിച്ച ഒരു കാലം. The term derives from the word picaro for rogue or rascal. Picaresque is basically a story of Picaro, a rogue, a rascal, a low-born hero who learns to survive by hook or crook. Lazarello del Toro അതുപോലത്തെ കഥയാണ്. The hero is Lazaro whose stepfather had died and അമ്മ മാത്രമേ ഉള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ അമ്മ എന്ത് ചെയ്തു, മകനെ ഒരു ബ്ലൈൻഡ് ബെഗറിനെ ഏൽപ്പിച്ചു. Help him to teach to survive. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ ആ ബ്ലൈൻഡ് ബെഗറിന്റെ കൂടെ നടക്കുക. Lazarello learns to survive in a very unholy world. And through Lazarello, we get a picture of how the people, ordinary people, lower class people, lived during the 16th century. So this is what Picasso does. He gives a real life picture of how real life people, especially low social class people, live. Uh, Again, there is a social context as to why this form of novel developed. Yani പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ modern novel was a transition from chivalric romance to a modern realistic version. ആ ട്രാൻസിഷനുള്ള ഒരു കാരണം chivalric romanceന് ജന്മം കൊടുത്ത പഴയ ലോകം, the chivalric feudal medieval world was dying. Just like how chivalric romance was dying, the world that gave birth to chivalric romance, the feudal world and the feudal ideals were dying. It was giving birth to a new world which is dominated by trade, by merchant class, and a new form of world order. അപ്പോൾ കാലം മാറുന്നുണ്ട്. ആ ഒരു ട്രാൻസിഷൻ ഇടയ്ക്കാണ് പിക്കാറസ് വരുന്നത്. So the old world order was dying, feudal lords were losing power and money, and the world was transitioning. ഈ ഒരു violent ട്രാൻസിഷനിങ്ങിനിടയ്ക്ക് പെട്ടുപോയ lower class people, they have to survive. സർവൈവ് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടി അവർക്ക് ജീവിക്കാൻ എന്തും ചെയ്യേണ്ട ഒരു അവസ്ഥ വരെ. ആ അവസ്ഥയാണ് പിക്കാറസ് നോവൽ ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. So you have a very cunning hero trying to survive by hook or crook in a very corrupt society. What Picaro's novel does is it presents a very realistic picture of the world. പലപ്പോഴും വളരെ സാറ്ററിക്കലായി, പലപ്പോഴും വളരെ ഹ്യൂമർ ഉപയോഗിച്ച്, എന്നാൽ വളരെ റിയലിസ്റ്റിക് ആയി ലോകം എങ്ങനെയാണോ, ലോവർ സ്ട്രാറ്റയുടെ ലോകം എങ്ങനെയാണോ അത് ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒന്നാണ് പിക്കാറസ്. Now compare Picaro's to romance, which is entirely exhibited by aristocrats, lords and ladies. With a complete opposite ആണ് Picaros. That is some of the major Picaros novels. Particularly familiar one is Gil Blas by Lesage, and there's the English Picaros. The very first English Picaros novel was The Unfortunate Traveler by Thomas Nash. We have plenty of Picaros novels in English literature, particularly the very first novel from Henry Fielding and Tom Jones was a Picaros novel. When Tobias Smollett was famous for his Picaros novel, he only wrote Picaros novels actually. Then Charles Dickens, David Copperfield, Rudyard Kipling, the Kim, Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a very beloved Picaros novel. Jack Kerouac's On the Road is a modern one, and so is Helen Harvey's 30 Weeks. So Picaros novel, the tradition is still there, but the genre has almost kind of died out. But Picaros is considered the very first subgenre of fiction that was born. Second one is Gothic novel. One sec. Okay. So നോവലിന്റെ ഹിസ്റ്ററിയിൽ ആദ്യം ജനിക്കുന്ന ആളാണ് പിക്കാറസ്. തൊട്ട് പിറകെ ബൈ 19th century ഒരു റൊമാൻറ്റിക് പീരീഡ് വരുന്നതോടുകൂടെ you have two other subgenres. One is Gothic novel, the other one is historical novel. Both the products of romantic movement. As you remember, romantic movement was a moment that celebrated imagination. So realismത്തിന്റെ ഡോസ് ഒരിത്തിരി കുറവായിരിക്കും. They tend to wander towards the supernatural, creating an imaginative world, not capturing a real world. അതിന്റെ ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ ആണ് The Birth of Gothic. Now the word Gothic is derived from the Greek word gothos, who during the medieval age the term was used to describe Goths, which meant barbarous or uncultured. And Gothic architecture itself was considered uncultured and barbaric. അതിൽ നിന്നാണ് ഈ Gothic novel പേര് വരുന്നത്. But as romantic movement came in, the meaning kind of changed. Gothic was also meant to be inspiring, captivating, mysterious. അപ്പോൾ അതിന്റെ ഒരു നെഗറ്റീവ് കൊണോട്ടേഷൻ അത് മാറാൻ തുടങ്ങി. So the very first Gothic novel was actually supposed to be a joke. Horace Walpole wrote Castle of Otranto, a Gothic story, a subtle joke on romance. But unexpectedly the novel clicked, and eventually Horace Walpole and anyway, it's from the subtitle Castle of Otranto, a Gothic story. Other than that, Gothic. So what exactly is a Gothic novel? Um, well, like I said, if you look at the history of fiction, there is a conflict between romance and realism. ഇത് രണ്ടും തമ്മിൽ ഒരു കോൺസ്റ്റന്റ് പുഷ് ആൻഡ് പുൾ ഉണ്ട് നോവലിന്റെ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റിൽ. അപ്പോ ഗോത്തിക് നോവലിലോട്ട് വരുമ്പോഴേക്കും റിയലിസം സ്ലൈറ്റ്ലി ടേക്സ് ദ ബാക്ക് സീറ്റ് ആൻഡ് യു ഹാവ് റൊമാൻസ് മാരിയിങ്. So this is a combination of realism and romance. See, so so what exactly is a Gothic novel? Gothic novel under that was 6 days. This is a novel that's all about creating mystery and suspense. പറഞ്ഞ ഇമാജിനേഷന് ഇഷ്ടംപോലെ വളം ആവശ്യമുള്ള ഒരു കാലമാണ് ഗോത്തിക് നോവൽ. So first of all, it's all about creating an atmosphere of mystery and romance. And there is an important setting. So the setting is usually somewhere remote, in place or time. Preferably a ruined castle, or some dark corner, or dark forest with a cemetery nearby. അങ്ങനെ വളരെ മിസ്റ്റീരിയസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സെറ്റിംഗ് ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആണ്. ആൻഡ് രണ്ട്, ഈ മിസ്റ്റീരിയസ് സെറ്റിംഗ് മാത്രം പോരാ, to add further mystery, we need further ingredients like family secrets or ancient prophecy or visions or omens or curses, ancestral curses, അങ്ങനെ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒക്കെ ഒരു ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് സ്റ്റോറി ഉണ്ട്. തിങ്ക് മറ്റൊരു പോലെ തകർന്നൊരു കൊട്ടാരവും അതിന് പിന്നിൽ ഒരു കഥയും കാണും. So you have to create a setting that is very mysterious and downright suspenseful. Third element, it should have a supernatural, unexplainable event. The supernatural ആകാം, പിന്നീട് ക്ലാരൊക്കെ ചെയ്തതുപോലെ അതിനെ നമുക്ക് എക്സ്പ്ലെയിൻ ചെയ്യാം, or it will continue as supernatural. So we can have ghosts or unexplained events, preferably at night. We have creaking stairs, hidden trapdoors. ഇങ്ങനെ ആകപ്പാടെ ഒരു atmosphere of terror and horror ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാണ് ഗോത്തിക് നോവലിന്റെ പ്രൈമറി പർപ്പസ്. ഇനി ടെറർ ആൻഡ് ഹൊറർ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്താൽ മാത്രം പോരാ, അത് കണ്ട് പേടിക്കാനുള്ള ആൾക്കാരും വേണം. So we have women who almost always faint all the time. So damsels in distress. You have young, beautiful, virginal women who are trapped in this castle. പെട്ടുപോകുന്ന പേടിക്കുന്ന women. And also, where there is women, there should be men. So you have a hero and an anti-hero. Now, Gothic hero, or should I say the Gothic villain, is a very unique kind of villain. He is an anti-hero who is gloomy, who is mysterious, who is powerful, who is who has committed a sin, who has a cloudy past, and yet is very fascinating and appealing. So you have two kinds of heroes. You have the Gothic hero come anti-hero come villain, who traps the villain, who is all powerful, who is dominating, tyrannical, and yet somehow darkly attractive. And then you have the hero who comes in and rescues this damsel in distress. So altogether, there is this element of romance, a love story. There is an element of adventure and escape, and there is an element of mystery and suspense. ഇതെല്ലാത്തിനെയും കൂടെ ഒരു ഡെലീഷ്യസ് കോമ്പിനേഷൻ ആണ് ഗോത്തിക് നോവൽ. One sec. Okay, so coming back to Gothic novel, let's rewind. So, നമ്മളെ മോഡേൺ ഫിക്ഷൻ ട്രേസ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ റൊമാൻറ്റിക്കേറ്റിന്റെ സ്വന്തം കോൺട്രിബ്യൂഷൻസ് ആണ് രണ്ട് ജോൺറ. ഒന്ന് ഗോത്തിക് നോവൽ. അപ്പോൾ ഗോത്തിക് നോവലിന്റെ കീ ഫീച്ചർ, ഇറ്റ്സ് ഓൾ അബൌട്ട് മിസ്റ്ററി ആൻഡ് സസ്പെൻസ്. അപ്പൊ അതിന് ആദ്യം പിന്നീട് മിസ്റ്റീരിയസ് സെറ്റിംഗ്, ഒരു റൂയിൻ കാസിൽ, ഒരു ഒറ്റപ്പെട്ടുപോയ കാസിൽ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ തിങ്ക് കർപ്പാത്തിയൻ. One of the most celebrated Gothic novels is Bram Stoker's Dracula. So think Carpathian, Transylvania, Carpathian മലനിരകളിലുള്ള ഡ്രാക്കുളയുടെ കാസൽ, ഒറ്റപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കാസൽ. nearby the cliffs in the mountains. So that itself creates an element of suspense and mystery. But yeah, there are a lot of rumors, prophecies, omens, like something's about to happen. എന്തോ വരാനിരിക്കുന്നതിന് ഒരു പൊട്ടൻഷ്യസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഇത് കാണും. അപ്പൊ കേഴ്സസോ പ്രോപ്പർട്ടീസോ എന്തെങ്കിലും കാണും. Then supernatural happening keeps happening. ഞാൻ ഈ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഹിഡൻ സ്റ്റേഴ്സും ട്രാപ്പ് ഡോഴ്സും ഒക്കെ കാണും. Then there is this, usually dark and night and rain and storms കാണും. അതിനെ further activate ചെയ്യാൻ. And finally the characters, a very sweet damsel in distress who's trapped in this castle. You have a powerful, mysterious, somehow dangerously attractive anti-hero and a hero. Altogether, there is something forbidden about this gothic novel. Now let's look into the three major, the trinity of writers who transform this genre. I'm sure you're familiar with the writers of the English Gothic writers, but let's look into Gothic genre and the European writers. In particular, the very founder of this genre, the founding father of this genre, Edgar Allan Poe. First and foremost, the founding father of Gothic genre. Now, why is he called the founding father of this genre? Poe's name, there were Gothic novels, but Poe was the one who perfected this genre. If possible, try to read Poe's work, and you get to see how Poe perfected this genre by adding certain, by refining this genre basically. So Poe introduced psychological motives into the mentally disturbed, tormented individuals, and thereby, elevating this genre into a highly respectable, but very unique genre. Now, from Poe, we have to move on to Bram Stoker, the man who single-handedly invented the subgenre of vampiric literature. Bram Stoker wrote this one book, Dracula, which was not really a success during his lifetime, but after his death, it was celebrated Dracula, and it has given birth to an entire subgenre of vampiric literature. From Dracula to, there is a long distance from Dracula to Twilight and Vampire Diaries and so on and so forth. But Dracula is a perfect example of supernatural Gothic literature. Then you have Mary Shelley. Now, when you talk about Gothic novel, most of them are romance, but Gothic novel also tend to branch out to other subgenres. And one of them is science fiction. And Mary Shelley was one of the earliest writers of Gothic science fiction. She wrote this one work, Frankenstein, but again, one of the greatest Gothic works ever. So these three are considered the major writers of Gothic fiction. Now, Gothic novel has evolved a lot in the modern world. We don't have a modern Gothic novel per se, but we do have genres that have targeted out of, that were bloomed out of Gothic novel, namely suspense, thrillers, detective fiction, horror stories, and so on and so forth. Psychological stories, psychological movies, so on and so forth. So these are all offshoots of the Gothic genre. So even modern writers like Stephen King or massively use the Gothic trope to create an element of horror and terror. When you look, if you are familiar with horror movies or horror fiction, if you look at horror fiction, they exclusively use the motives of Gothic novel to create an element of mystery and suspense. Not just Gothic novel or horror novel. If you look at some of the classics like, say, Jane Eyre, or even What 30 Years of Solitude, or Abdullah Mabslow by forgot his name. So these kind of works do have a Gothic element to it. Or in better example, Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame. All of this has this ruined, grand architecture, an element of mystery and suspense, a doomed romance, family secret, so on and so forth. Motifs exclusively used by the Gothic novel. Okay, I hope you are back. So we're talking about European fiction, um, you know, how it evolved. Uh, so we looked at Renaissance, uh, Italian Renaissance, and how Renaissance brought about a shift in sensibility. So you can see the slow transition from chivalric, idealistic chivalric romance about nobles and knights to an increased realism. Uh, how common people, ordinary people, and ordinary life, realism started to invade chivalric romance, and how step by step, degree by degree, um, modern novel has started to evolve, starting with Picaresque novel and Gothic novel, and we'll look into the third genre, historical novel. Now, as the name suggests, historical novel is set in history. In any period of time which predates the author's own time. It could be 10 years ago, sorry, not 10 years, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, even prehistoric times. For example, William Golding, Inheritors. This is a historical novel set in prehistoric times when the last Neanderthal group meets the Homo sapiens. So, Neanderthal group the അവസാനത്തെ group, they meet the new modern man, the Homo sapiens, who is going to soon take over their world. ആ ഒരു historic meeting-നെ base ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് ആ നോവൽ വന്നിരിക്കുന്നത്. So historical novel could be set in any period of history. So historic ആകാം, ancient Greco-Roman ആകാം, or it could be much more recent like Second World War or Nazi Germany or modern Civil War and so on and so forth. Okay, so the key thing is historical novel has to be historically accurate. So the accuracy ഉണ്ടാകണം, both in the place and the timing. So writing a historical novel requires considerable research by the author, by the writer. അപ്പോൾ സെറ്റിംഗ് മിക്കവാറും ഈ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ സെറ്റിംഗ് ആയിരിക്കും. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, വളരെ മോണ്യുമെന്റൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക് ഇവന്റിന്റെ കസ്പിലായിരിക്കും പ്ലോട്ട് സെറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടാവുക. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ, ദ ഫൗണ്ടർ ഓഫ് ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ നോവൽസ് വാസ് വാൾട്ടർ സ്കോട്ട്, through his Bovery novels. So Scott in a novel, there are a series of novels that we call Bovery novels, and his historical setting used to change. It could be on 11th century England, medieval time, Scottish history, 17th century England, 17th century France, ഒക്കെ മാറാം. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ സെറ്റിംഗ്സ് മാറും. ബട്ട് സ്കോട്ട് ഓൾവേസ് ഡിഡ് വൺ തിങ്, ഒരു മൊമെന്റസ് ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ ഇവന്റ് നടക്കുന്ന കസ്പിലായിരിക്കും പ്ലോട്ട് നടക്കുക. സോ ദാറ്റ് ആ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ സെറ്റിംഗിന്റെ പേർപ്പസ് തന്നെ അതാണ്, how history affects people and people's lives, the choices they make. So historical setting is not just there for decoration, it propels the plot, it adds to the plot. But not all the events that happen in the novel is historic. പലപ്പോഴും ഇമാജിനറി പ്ലോട്ടും ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ പ്ലോട്ടും തമ്മിലൊരു ഇന്റർവീവിംഗ് ആണ് ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ നോവൽ. ഇനി ഇതൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോഴും there are also another genre which uses alternate history. For example, Second World War നാസി ജർമ്മനി ജയിച്ചു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള alternate historical novelsഉം കാണും. Entirely historical accuracy നമുക്ക് പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. So historical novels are usually placed in a historical setting. പലപ്പോഴും ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക് ഇവന്റ്സിന്റെ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് കാണും, and sometimes historical characters actually take part in the plot. For example, Kenilworth, Walter Scott in the Kenilworth, Queen Elizabeth is a character. Now she is not fictional, she is actually a historical figure, but the rest of the characters can be fictional. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഒരു ഫ്ലെക്സിബിലിറ്റി ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ നോവൽ ഓഫർ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. Okay. Now one of the crucial things about historical novels, one of the reasons why historical novels thrive so much, kind of unlike Gothic novel or Picaresque novel, which are no more alive nowadays, historical novels thrive. I'm sure you're familiar with hit series like Downton Abbey അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നെറ്റ്ഫ്ലിക്സിലുള്ള ഒരു ബ്രിഡ്ജർട്ട്നോ ഡൗൺടൺ ആബി ഒക്കെ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടാവും. So particularly historical romances are really popular. You must have read Outlander series at least. You have Regency romances, all kinds of romances. So historical novel is even now very much thriving and kicking. But the one crucial thing about historical novel is that it conveys the social conditions of an age. You know, the audience has an interest in what life was like in the past age. അത് ഭംഗിയായി ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യാൻ ഒരു പരിധി വരെ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ നോവലിന് കഴിയും. Examples include some of the classic examples include A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens and War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. If done rightly, historical novel can transcend the genre and become a great work of art. But most of the time, historical novels tend to be mainly for entertainment. So some of the popular historical novels include The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, Outlander series, The Book Thief, so on and so forth. Also, we have to mention one historical series that got Man Booker Prize and is highly acclaimed. Is Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall and Part 1 and 2, Part 1, 2 and 3 actually. So this novel is actually based on a historical figure. So imaginary figures കുറവാണ്. The central character in a historical figure is Thomas Cromwell, and it's set in the Elizabethan England, in the 15th century England, the court of Henry VIII, and Henry VIII and his queen Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour plays important role. So historical accuracy കുറേയധികം കൂടുതലുള്ള ഒരു നോവൽ സീരീസ് ആണ് ഹിലറി മാൻറ്റലിന്റെ വോയിസ് കോൾ സീരീസ്. Okay. Now we have almost completed the first module. കുറച്ചുകൂടെ ബാക്കിയുണ്ട് because we have traced the transition. We have studied how Picaresque novel evolved. Prose fiction പയ്യെ Picaresque നോവലിലോട്ട് വരുന്നു. അവിടെ നിന്ന് by romantic movement, romantic movement we have Gothic novel and historical novel, and new genres continue to emerge. But one of the crucial ages during the emergence of novel is 19th century. അപ്പോൾ തൽക്കാലം നമ്മൾ ഇപ്പോൾ അത് നോക്കുന്നില്ല കാരണം it's too lengthy. So I'm going to start with one prescribed novel, and we'll continue this module in the next class when we will talk about how 18th century novel became much more realism, how realism as a movement emerged, how it changed novel. We're going to look at the great writers of the 19th century from Tolstoy to Dickens. That's what we're going to do. But right now, because we just have, we need some more time, and you might be pretty bored with all this history, we're going to look into one prescribed novel for you, which is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. Okay, so interestingly, French writer Gustave Flaubert wrote his very first novel, which became a cult classic, Madame Bovary. It was published in 1856. ആദ്യം serialized ആയിട്ട് publish ചെയ്യുന്നു. ക്രമേണ it was later published as a single novel in the following year in 2 volumes. Now, Madame Bovary is a seminal work of literary realism. Realism launch ചെയ്ത വർക്കാണ് Madame Bovary എന്ന് പറയാം. And Flaubert is considered one of the fathers of realism movement. So let's take a detailed look at the author, Gustave Flaubert. Now, Flaubert was born into an ordinary middle-class family. His father was a surgeon, mother was the daughter of a physician, and Flaubert, even when he was a child, started writing, but at the age of 15, he had won a prize for an essay on mushroom. അപ്പോൾ a teenage പ്രായത്തിലാണ് ഫ്ലോബെ starts one of the most important, I wouldn't say relationship, yes, but yeah, he meets uh, one of the two women who played a very important role in his life. First one is Eliza Schnesinger. She was much older than Flobe, married and much older. So for Flobe, she was this idealistic woman. എല്ലാ സ്കൂൾ കാലത്തുള്ള ക്രഷ് പോലെ ഒരിക്കലും കിട്ടാൻ സാധിക്കുന്ന ഫോർബിഡൻ ഫ്രൂട്ട് അതായിരുന്നു എലൈസ. Much older and married, but Flobe was platonically and idealistically in love with her for many, many, many years. And you can see the influence of this love in this book, Bovery, how Leon looks at Emma. Okay. Now, like I said, Flobe was a middle class man, but he was also one who actively, violently despised his middle class background. So much so he rebelled against it and was expelled from school. So he completed his education privately in Paris. In 1884, Flobe had a nervous breakdown. He was studying law. He had a nervous breakdown somehow. Some say it's because of epilepsy, and he could not complete his studies. He failed his law exams and decided that he's going to spend the rest of his life studying and writing literature. So Flobe was set up by his father, who bought him a house, and he started his writing career. Now, from 1849 to 1851, he traveled widely across country, and then when he came back, he decided to write something. He decided to write a novel about nothing. That was his idea. And Flobe had this idea to write about a young girl, a pious virgin girl who lives with her parents and dies a saint. Now, when he told the idea to his friends encouraged him, asked him to write something much more bourgeoisie, much more interesting, entertaining, so that people will actually read it. So Flobe decided to keep the idea and was he was looking for ideas, and that's when he noticed a case. In 1848, there was a case of a real life case of Delphine Delaware. Delphine Delaware. The newspapers published a case of Delphine, who was the second wife of a doctor. Now, it was a pretty scandalous case because Delphine, even though she was married, was having multiple affairs, had borrowed a lot of money, and ended up in trouble. So she committed suicide. Her husband was heartbroken, and the husband committed suicide. And eventually, the only person left from their family was their little daughter. Now, this is a very sordid story. ഒരുപക്ഷെ മഞ്ഞപ്പത്രങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഇന്നും ഇടയ്ക്കിടയ്ക്ക് വരുന്ന കഥയാണ്. കാമുകനെ കൂടെ പോകാനായിട്ട് ഭർത്താവിനെ കുഞ്ഞിനെ ഉപേക്ഷിച്ച് പോകുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഭർത്താവിന് കുഞ്ഞിന് വിഷം കലക്കി കൊടുക്കുന്നു. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള പത്രവാർത്തകൾ ഇടയ്ക്കിടയ്ക്ക് നമ്മളും കാണാറുണ്ട്. അത് വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ എല്ലാവരും we all morally condemn that person. How could she? She is a mother, for God's sake. She is married. എന്തിനാണ് കാമുകന് വേണ്ടി ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുന്നതെന്ന് നമ്മളും ചിന്തിക്കാറുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ വളരെ സോർഡിഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഓർഡിനറി ഇനഫ് സ്റ്റോറി that happened in provincial. But Flobe was interested. Remember, Flobe was a realist, and as a realist, Flobe's idea was to capture life as it is. Not to create a story, but to capture a story that has already happened, that happens all the time. This seems a very ordinary sordid story, and Flobe decided to write about the story. And in Flobe's hands, this story transformed into a Western classic called Madame Bovary. So Delphine Delany becomes Madame Bovary. Angane Flobe starts to write. He had set on to write a novel about nothing, and for him this was nothing pretty much. So he set on to write, and it took him 5 years to complete the novel. It's astounding. Karanam, Flobe's contemporary writers, including Emile Zola, wrote at least one novel per year. That was the usual trend. അപ്പോൾ 5 വർഷമൊക്കെ എടുത്തൊരു നോവൽ എഴുതുക വളരെ അൺയൂഷ്വൽ ആണ്. പെർട്ടിക്കുലർലി a small, comparatively small novel like Madame Bovary. It was a basically small novel. But anyway, it took long 5 years to complete it, and that's not because he was having trouble writing. The problem was Flaubert was a perfectionist. He did not care about the plot. He was concerned about one thing: his style, style and style only. He was obsessed with the right word. So it took him weeks and months to write one perfect line or one perfect paragraph. But it paid off. Now, Madame Bovary might have a very ordinary, remember, a very ordinary story, but it's Flaubert's style that transforms this ordinary story into an extraordinary literary achievement. Okay. Uh, More on that later. Anyway, it was first published serialized in the review, and pretty soon the novel picked up a scandal, and there was a trial. Well, Flaubert was prosecuted for, offending morality and public religion, because this was a novel about adultery, a woman cheating on the husband. So there was a huge trial, and the novel became famous even before it was published. But Flaubert somehow escaped conviction, and the novel was published the very next year, and it was a huge success. From the moment of its from the day it was published, Madame Bovary has effectively transformed Western canon, and we'll see how. Anyway, Madame Bovary established Flaubert as a successful writer, and he could count the who's who of literary world at his time, including Emile Zola and the Russian writer Diogenes. Now, uh, Zola and his group, Flaubert and his group of writers, his friends, they're all dedicated to one idea: realism, an accurate representation of life as it is. By 1870, Flaubert was acclaimed as a great writer. Flaubert has written only very few works. One of his last works include three short stories and a story of attack between Rome and Carthage named Salambo in 1862. But none of the works could come anywhere near Madame Bovary. So at the age of 59, he died at 1880, and by the time he was already a literary celebrity. And it continues to be so to this day. Flaubert has been hailed by Henry James as a novelist. Before we look at Emma, we have to look into Flaubert and his concept of and the movement of realism which he pioneered. Now, what exactly is realism? Realism was an aesthetic doctrine that evolved in 19th century. Flaubert is a good example of realism. So, what does realism do? Well, realism is all about an objective representation of life as we see it. That's a very simple explanation. But before we jump into realism, let's see how it evolved. Now, realism was a counterpart of romantic movement, which preceded it. So you remember romantic movement, right? Which happened in the first early half of the 19th century. So in France, where realism and naturalism was born, romantic movement has declined. The French Revolution, the monarchy has declined. People were disillusioned, and there was this rise of middle class, which was much more commonsensical, much more empirical, much more logical, and realism basically evolved as a reaction against this romantic ideal and its the disillusion with romantic ideals. So you have a new rising class of bourgeoisie, which imposed their ideas of common sense, reason, and respectability and conformity on society. So these were the great days of common sense. And it is in this context that realism slowly started to emerge. So for Flaubert, the novelist is all about holding a mirror to the world at the test. എന്ത് കാണുന്നു അത് അതുപോലെ ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു ജോലി മാത്രമേ നോവലിസ്റ്റിനുള്ളൂ. He should not try to explain or teach or judge. Just show what he sees around him. കേൾക്കാൻ വളരെ സിമ്പിൾ ആണ്, but it's very difficult to really put to practice. Before Flaubert, novel was all about plot, 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 and more plot. It's all about story and a lot of story at that. Flaubert was the first novelist who put style above novel, and he tried to make a very neutral, realistic style. So remember Emma's story of a woman cheating on her husband. So immediately we tend to morally judge or condemn Emma for what she's doing, because obviously what she's doing is wrong. But Flaubert is such a good writer that by the end of the novel, we don't condemn Emma. We understand Emma. We even sympathize with her. We pity her. At least we understand why she did what she did. It's one of the greatest things about Emma is that you understand that you can destroy your marriage, cheat on your husband without being a bad person at all. And Flaubert convinces us wonderfully, thanks to his style, his artistic style. So, so this is what he believed in representing reality as it is. And not just any reality, the normal everyday life of ordinary people. Very crucial definition, crucial change. Remember, up until realistic novel emerged, literature was dominated by the upper class. It was again by the aristocrats, for the aristocrats, at least the upper middle class, the lords and the ladies. But it was novel that fundamentally changed it. Think Samuel Richardson's Pamela, the very first English novel. It's telling how the heroine of the very first novel is not a lady or even a middle class wife, but a servant girl. Okay. അതുപോലെ ordinary typical form of life അതുപോലെ ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യാന്നുള്ളതാണ് റീലിസ്റ്റിന്റെ പർപ്പസ്, ബോത്ത് ഇൻ സ്റ്റൈൽ ആൻഡ് പ്ലോട്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് എവിടെയും എപ്പോഴും നടക്കാവുന്ന ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ഓർഡിനറി കഥ ഫ്ലോബറിന്റെ നോവലിനായിട്ട് തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കുന്നത്. And it's Flaubert's style and mastery that transforms this ordinary story into something evergreen, a masterpiece. And let's see how he does that. So, like I said, Flaubert was inspired by a real life story. Pastel നടന്ന ഒരു കഥ പത്രത്തിൽ വായിച്ച ഒരു case study about a young woman who cheated on her husband, shopped a lot, created a debt, and ultimately committed suicide to escape from it all. So, നടന്ന ഒരു കഥ, and nothing unusual about it. A very ordinary story. There is no great moral dilemma. There is no quest for the understanding of human life. There is no existential crisis. There is not even much drama. A very ordinary draft story. But, like I said, Flaubert has transformed it into a masterpiece. Now, how did he do that? എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഭർത്താവിനെ വഞ്ചിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ഭാര്യ ഒരു ക്ലാസിക് നോവലായി മാറുന്നത്? One of the reasons is because Flaubert's style. And he പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ Flaubert was very meticulous about his style, so his style remained neutral throughout. At the end result, നമുക്ക് ഒരു പോയിന്റിൽ പോലും Flaubert എമ്മയെ കണ്ടം ചെയ്യുകയോ എമ്മ ചെയ്ത തെറ്റാണെന്നോ എന്നാൽ എമ്മയെ സിമ്പതൈസ് ചെയ്യാനോ അനുവദിക്കത്തില്ല. It remains very neutral. At one point you feel sympathy, at the next point Flaubert തന്നെ condemns her by mocking her. So this keeps on. So by the time she commits suicide, you feel pity, but you understand why she does it. So ഒരു സൈഡും ചേരാതെ വളരെ ക്ലിയർ ആയിട്ട് വളരെ സിമ്പത്തിയോട് കൂടെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യാൻ ഫ്ലോബർക്ക് പറ്റുന്നതല്ല. ഇന്നിപ്പോ when you read the novel you might think that yes, but what's so great about it? Hardly original എന്ന് നമുക്ക് തോന്നാം. But that's because Madame Bovery has created a standard of how psychological novels should be. പിന്നീട് വരുന്ന നോവലുകളെല്ലാം തന്നെ directly indebted to the novel. That's why it looks so familiar and so ordinary. But otherwise, it was a highly original novel. Okay. Now, like I said, this is a story of a young woman who, a very beautiful young woman, beautiful, intelligent, and very young woman. The problem is that she reads novels. That's a problem. She reads romances, a lot of romances. അപ്പോൾ ഇതൊരു ഡോൺ കിഹോട്ടയുടെ ഒരു പാരഡിയാണ്. ഡോൺ കിഹോട്ടയുടെ ഒക്കെ ഒരു പാരലൽ ആണ്. ഷീസ് എ ഫീമെയിൽ ഡോൺ കിഹോട്ടെ. ഷീ reads all these romance novels. Unlike Don Quixote, she lives in an delusional world. So, it's romance novels shows her what romance should be, what love should be. Love is this fiery, intense emotion where every day is an adventure. So, Emma, our heroine, is waiting to be swept off her feet by handsome and perfect hero. ഒരുപാട് കൊറിയൻ ഡ്രാമ കാണുമ്പോൾ you expect this ordinary average girl to be swept off her feet by this rich, extremely handsome, perfect CEO of some big company. എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെ Emma expected adventure, expected this unrealistic, unattainable ideal of love in her life. This is what she learned from romance fiction. And then she meets reality. So she goes off and marries the first person who shows interest in her, and reality sets in. The man is a very ordinary man, Charles. So, Emma has this high delusional notion about romance that she cannot understand the reality of marriage. She cannot understand that having dinner with the same person every single day is going to be boring. But having a child, raising a child will be difficult. Emmaki reality accept cheyane pattilla because she has been taught by romance novels that love should be just so and so. So she tries to find some form of intense emotion. She could not find that in love, in motherhood, in marriage. So she tries to go outside marriage. And then she takes in lovers. But every day Emma cannot find what she's looking for. What she doesn't realize is that she cannot find what she's looking for, this intense emotion, because it does not exist. അത് ബുക്കുകളിൽ മാത്രമേ ഉള്ളൂ, റിയൽ ലൈഫിൽ ഇല്ല എന്നുള്ള കാര്യം എമ്മ തിരിച്ചറിയുന്നേയില്ല. So her entire life is this long search of an illusion, a long search of feeling alive. So she takes lover after lover. She takes, she goes on shopping, buying things beyond her means, just to get that kick, that intense emotion, just to feel alive. She feels trapped in a marriage with a boring man. അപ്പോൾ അവസാനം ഒന്നുമില്ലാതാകുമ്പോഴേക്കും eventually she has to pay back. So her debt becomes too much, and eventually the court orders her to pay back the money. വീട് ജപ്തി ചെയ്യാൻ ആള് വരുന്നു, എല്ലാം അറിയും, എല്ലാം നഷ്ടപ്പെടും, എല്ലാവരാലും ഉപേക്ഷിക്കപ്പെടുന്ന എമ്മയാണ് അവസാനം she commits suicide. പക്ഷെ അവിടെയും പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ tries to take arsenic and commit suicide. പക്ഷെ റൊമാൻസ് നോവലിനെ പോലെ ഹീറോയിനെ പോലെ മരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. She dies a slow, agonizing death. അപ്പോഴും her husband adores Emma. So he has absolutely no idea what she was up to. Even മരണശേഷവും he is heartbroken. He loses his job. He loses his home. He has turned Emma's room into a shrine. And finally, വളരെ വൈകിയാണ് he realizes, he gets a series of love letters by Emma. That's when he realizes what his wife has done, and he dies of heartbreak. മിച്ചമുള്ളത് മകള് മാത്രമാണ്, the young birthday. Now, the birthday was sent to her grandmother, but grandmother മരണത്തോടുകൂടെ birthday is sent to her distant aunt. Currently, birthday is working in a cotton company, cotton factory. അവിടെ ജോലി ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു വേലക്കാരിയെ ബർത്ത്ഡേയുടെ ജീവിതം. This is the tragedy of Emma Bovery. Now, interestingly, പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ Emma is not a wanton woman. It's just that she, like Don Quixote, believes in romance and has absolutely no idea of reality. അതാണ് എമ്മയുടെ പ്രശ്നം. She has read too many women, and this is why Emma, we kind of feel pity for Emma despite what she does. Now, if you think about it, This is the story of a woman who is trapped in a marriage with a mediocre man who does not understand her. So ideally, she reminds us of many other heroines of Henry James or Edith Waters, heroines, tragic heroines like Anna Karenina. Tolstoy's Anna Karenina ഇതുപോലൊരു കഥാപാത്രമാണ്. Anna Karenina is an aristocrat. She is distinguished, beautiful, admired by a lot of people, and like Emma, trapped in a unsatisfactory marriage with an unappealing man. She is also a mother like Emma. And Anna meets her love, Vronsky, outside marriage. She starts an affair. അതുകൊണ്ട് she is condemned by the society, punished by the author Tolstoy himself, and Anna tragically has to die. Okay. So, Anna Karenina is considered as a tragic woman. Societal rules പെട്ടുപോയ ഒരു സ്ത്രീ. A woman who is forced by her gender and by her class to live a certain way. So Anna Karenina comes off the tragic hero. But our Emma Bovery, Madame Bovery, is a bourgeoisie version of Anna Karenina. So റിയൽ ലൈഫിൽ അന്ന കരണീനമാർക്ക് എന്ത് സംഭവിക്കുന്നു, അന്ന കരണീനമാർ എങ്ങനെയാണ്, എന്ത് കാണിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് വളരെ ഭംഗിയായിട്ട് കാണിക്കുന്ന ഒരു നോവലാണ് മദാം ബോവറി. സോ അന്ന കരണീന പോലുള്ള നോവലുകൾ വായിച്ചിട്ടാണ് ജീവിതം ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണ്, റൊമാൻസ് ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണോ തെറ്റിദ്ധാരണ പാവം എമ്മയ്ക്ക് കിട്ടുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ എമ്മ, like Anna, is a very vivacious, beautiful woman who wants to enjoy her life, but is full of illusions created by romance. അപ്പോൾ ആ illusions ആണ് ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ എമ്മയെ തകർത്തത്. So this is not exactly a tragic heroine. അതൊരു എന്താ പറയാ, അതിലൊരു ഗ്രാൻഡിയർ നമുക്ക് തോന്നത്തില്ല. പകരം think you'll feel for Emma is pity, because it's her misguided illusions that leads her to destroy her own family. So let's look closely into the summary of the novel. Okay, so let's take a detailed look at the story. Titular character is Emma Bovery. Okay, Emma Bovery. So when the novel first starts, നമുക്ക് എമ്മയെ പരിചയപ്പെടുത്തുക. ആദ്യം നോവൽ ഫസ്റ്റ് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ Charles Bovery's point of view എന്നാണ് വരുന്നത്. And Charles meets Emma. So Charles is impressed by Emma because she is a very beautiful woman, convent educated. Emma കൊച്ചിലെ മരിച്ചുപോയി. അപ്പോൾ അത്യാവശ്യം വെൽ ടു ഡു ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഫാദർ, മോൺസിയർ ബോവറിയുടെ ഒരേ ഒരു മകൾ എമ്മ ബോവറി. Now maybe because she grew up in a convent, Emma used to read a lot of romance books, and ഈ റൊമാൻസ് ബുക്കിൽ നിന്നാണ് ജീവിതം എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണ് എന്ന് നമുക്ക് ഒരു ഐഡിയ കിട്ടുന്നത്. So ഇതാണ് Emma's reality. She grew up reading about princes and princesses, ladies and duchesses, and she wanted to live like that. To be saved by a hero, to have a life of adventure, to go to ball dancing, and to a life of wealth and beauty and fashion. That's Emma's സ്വപ്നം. But once she gets married, the reality comes crashing in. And novel മുഴുവൻ ഡ്രൈവ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് ഈ ഒരു clash between the romance and the reality. It is said that what Don Quixote did to chivalric romance, അതാണ് Emma Bovary did to romance. So this is a novel that takes an utterly realistic look at how delusional romance can be. So Emma grew up reading all these romance novels about, and she has a fixed idea of what romance should be. So Emmയുടെ ജീവിതം മുഴുവൻ ആ റൊമാൻസ് അന്വേഷിച്ചുള്ള ഒരു നീണ്ട യാത്ര, ഒരിക്കലും കിട്ടാത്ത ഒരു നീണ്ട യാത്ര. അപ്പോൾ the second character is Charles Bovery. So, like I said, നോവൽ തുടങ്ങുമ്പോൾ ആദ്യം വരുന്ന കഥാപാത്രം ചാൾസ് ബോവറിയാണ്. Charles was born in an ordinary family. Just an ordinary man, an average ordinary man. So ഒരുപാട് കഷ്ടപ്പെട്ട് he becomes a country doctor, and once he becomes a doctor, he has a very dominating mother who dotes on him. His mother finds him a bride, a much older, rather ugly, but considerably rich ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു woman, supposedly rich ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു woman. Now the woman is a shoe, keeps on nagging him. അപ്പോൾ വീട്ടിൽ ഒരു സ്വരവും ഇല്ലാതെ വിഷമിച്ചെടുക്കുന്ന ബോവറിയുടെ മുന്നിലോട്ടാണ് ഒരു പേഷ്യന്റെ മകളായ എമ്മ വരുന്നത്. And Charles Bovery is instantly captivated. So it's first through the eyes of Charles that we get to see Emma at the beginning. Now Charles has fallen in love with Emma, but he's already married. So what to do? അങ്ങനെ വിഷമിച്ചെടുക്കുമ്പോഴാണ് conveniently his first wife dies and Charles is free to marry Emma. And somehow Emma says yes. She was interested in this doctor. അങ്ങനെ Charles immediately marries Emma. And he devotes his entire life on Emma. He's so much in love with Emma. He's completely blind to her. Emma എന്ത് കാട്ടി കൂട്ടിയാലും Charles unquestioningly accepts it, and he does not even suspect her. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ എമ്മയുടെ മരണശേഷം വളരെ വൈകി മാത്രമാണ് ചാൾസ് കാര്യങ്ങൾ തിരിച്ചറിയുന്നത്. So this is a very ചാൾസിന്റെ ഒറ്റ വാക്കിൽ പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഈസ് എ വെരി ഹാംലെസ് ഗായ്. അങ്ങനെ ഗ്രേറ്റ് ഒന്നുമല്ല, ബട്ട് ഹാംലെസ്. ഭാര്യ പറയുന്ന എന്തിനും കൂട്ടുനിൽക്കുന്ന കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഭാര്യ ആബ്സല്യൂട്ട്ലി അഡോർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു lovable husband. At the same time, they got married, and kalyanatine honeymoon കഴിഞ്ഞു തുടങ്ങുന്നതോടുകൂടെ Emma slowly realizes that Charles is exactly that, harmless, not interesting at all. And slowly Emma is bored by him. അപ്പോൾ ആ നോവൽ ഫേർദർ പ്രോഗ്രസ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ എമ്മ ചെറിയ ചെറിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കും, ലൈക്ക് how he eats his food slowly, how he snores in his bed, പുള്ളിക്കാരന്റെ sloppy dressing. ക്രമേണ എമ്മയെ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങും. And slowly as routine sets in, day in and day out, she has to live with the same man. So here is this young, beautiful woman in her full bloom, and it's based on him, this ordinary, mediocre man who does not even understand her. Emma unhappy ആണെന്ന് പോലും തിരിച്ചറിയാൻ ചാൾസിന് പറ്റത്തില്ല. He's happy that he's got Emma and he takes her for granted. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ വളരെ മീഡിയോക്കർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഹസ്ബൻഡും വളരെ മീഡിയോക്കർ ആയി പോകുന്ന മുണ്ടെയിൻ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു റിയാലിറ്റിയിൽ പെട്ടുപോകുന്ന എമ്മ. ഫസ്റ്റ് as the honeymoon period starts to cool off, Emma gets slowly restless, വളരെ റെസ്ലെസ് ആകാൻ തുടങ്ങും. She starts to wonder, ഇതാണോ മാരേജ്? Because in the romance novels that I have read, this is not marriage. You have to have an adventure. I have to feel something. I have to feel emotions. I have to feel intensity. അതൊന്നും ഫീൽ ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല. അപ്പോൾ റൊമാൻസ് eventually cool off ചെയ്യുന്നുള്ളത് മാരേജ് ഇസ് all about reality എന്നുള്ളതും എമ്മ തിരിച്ചറിയുന്നേ ഇല്ല. And this is one great thing about this novel. Romance has talked about princes and princesses marrying and living happily ever after, but Madame Bovary shows us what happens after the happily ever after. What happens in every marriage, the boredom, the trouble it takes to maintain a relationship and to raise a child. About Emma becomes pregnant. So, seeing how Emma grows listless, the Charles Bovery decides that maybe a change of scenery is better. So, for his wife's health, they leave their practice and move to a fictional town of Yorkville. അവിടെയാണ് നമ്മുടെ മൂന്നാമത്തെ കഥാപാത്രം വരുന്നത് ലിയോൺ. So, they move to Yorkville, and Emma is pregnant. She gives birth to her child, a baby girl. അപ്പോൾ മെറ്റേണിറ്റിയിൽ സന്തോഷം കണ്ടെത്താനുള്ള എമ്മയുടെ ശ്രമങ്ങളും തകർന്ന് തരിപ്പുറമാണ്. ബിക്കോസ് ഷീ വാണ്ടഡ് ടു ഡു ഷോപ്പിംഗ് ആൻഡ് ഡെക്കറേറ്റ് ദ നഴ്സറി, പക്ഷെ അതിനുള്ള കാശ് തികയുന്നില്ല. സോ എമ്മ ഈസ് സൂൺ ഡിസപ്പോയിന്റഡ് ബൈ മാരേജ് ആൻഡ് മദർഹുഡ്. ഇനി എന്താന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് എമ്മയുടെ മുന്നിലോട്ടാണ് ലിയോൺ ചെല്ലുന്നത്. Now Leon was their neighbor and a student. So, like Emma, he also reads a lot of romance novels, listens to music. Emma പോലെ തന്നെ half delusional ആണ് ലിയോ. റൊമാൻസ് നോവലിലൊക്കെ ഉള്ളതുപോലെ he wanted to have a sister, a girlfriend. പക്ഷെ ആ വില്ലേജിൽ there is no one. അങ്ങനെ ഇരിക്കുമ്പോഴാണ് ഒരു പെർഫെക്റ്റ് കാൻഡിഡേറ്റ് ഉള്ളത് എമ്മയാണ്. This beautiful yet married woman, unattainable ആയിട്ടുള്ള forbidden love. So Leon starts to worship and adore Emma, and Emma realizes that Leon has a crush on me. So അത് കാണുന്നതോടെ Emma is happy and she curses herself. എന്തുകൊണ്ടെന്നാൽ ലിയോൺ ആദ്യം പരിചയപ്പെട്ടില്ല, ചാൾസിനെ പരിചയപ്പെട്ടു. She curses her bitter luck, and ഒരു self punishment എന്നതുപോലെ she creates this image of a devoted mother and wife. ഒരു punishment എന്നതുപോലെ she starts taking care of her husband and her daughter. So ഇത് കാണുന്തോറും Leon believes that it is impossible to get Emma. So finally, unable to bear his love, she leaves to Paris to study. Leon പോയി കഴിയുന്നതോടുകൂടിയാണ് Emma regrets her actions. Emma is bored to death. Emma actually positively hates her husband, and she wishes that she had had an affair with Leon. ഇതിന് പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ I should have started with Leon. I wasted an opportunity എന്ന് നമ്മൾ വിഷമിച്ചിരിക്കുമ്പോഴാണ് അമ്മയുടെ മുന്നിലോട്ട് enter Rudolph Molander. Now, this is Emma's first lover. Rudolph Leon pole ഒരാളെയല്ല. He is not a timid student. He is actually a wealthy landowner. But above all, he is also a very manipulative womanizer. Rudolph has a string of lovers, and doctor കാണാൻ വരുമ്പോൾ ആദ്യമായിട്ട് he pays attention to the doctor's wife. He realizes that there is a petty wife who is stuck with an ordinary, uninteresting man. So if I give her some time, if I show her some attention, she'll definitely fall for me because she must be bored of her husband. And then Rudolph starts to pay attention to Emma and seduce her. Now, one step forward, two steps backward, and he succeeds. And then Rudolph and Emma become lovers. So initially, honeymoon period, Emma finds her happiness, her definition of love with Rudolph. പക്ഷേ, like I said, കുറെ കഴിയുമ്പോൾ it cannot be sustained. കുറെ കഴിയുമ്പോൾ the passion starts to cool off. There is nothing new. അവർക്ക് പരസ്പരം ബോറടിച്ചു തുടങ്ങി. ആ ഒരു അവസരത്തിലാണ് അങ്ങനെ ബോറടിച്ചു തുടങ്ങി. വാട്ട് ടു ഡു എന്ന് എമ്മ അവിടെയും ബോറടിച്ചു തുടങ്ങുമ്പോഴാണ് the neighbor, the chemist Thomas, has an idea that Charles should perform a surgery. അപ്പോൾ അവിടുത്തെ ക്ലബ് ഫുഡുള്ള ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് ജസ്റ്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊരു പയ്യന് ഒരു സർജറി, ഒരു കോംപ്ലിക്കേറ്റഡ് സർജറി നടത്തുമ്പോൾ ആ സർജറി സക്സസ്ഫുൾ ആകുകയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചാൾസ് വിൽ ബി വെരി ഫേമസ് ആൻഡ് ബി എസ്റ്റാബ്ലിഷ്ഡ് ആസ് എ ഡോക്ടർ. അപ്പോൾ എമ്മക്ക് കേൾക്കുമ്പോഴേക്കും ഷീ വാസ് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റഡ് ആൻഡ് ഷീ പുഷസ് ചാൾസ് ടു ഡു ദ സർജറി. ചാൾസ് ഹാസ് ഹിസ് സസ്പിഷൻസ് കാരണം ഹി നോസ് what he can do and he cannot do, but his wife pushes him. But Emma was hoping that if Charles proves to be a very successful surgeon, if he proves to be a very capable, a doctor, this her ideal of a man, then maybe she'll forgive him. At least a good husband alleങ്കിലും ഞാനൊരു പണ്ഡിതനെയാണ്, ഞാനൊരു ജീനിയസിനെയാണ് കിട്ടിയത് എന്ന് സമാധാനിക്കാറുണ്ട്. അങ്ങനെ Charles is supposed to do the surgery broaches, and Charles ruins his reputation forever. More importantly, Emma is so disappointed in Charles, she renews her relationship with Rudolph. ഇത്തവണ relationship renew ചെയ്യുക മാത്രമല്ല, she plans to run off with Rudolph and she forces him. നമുക്ക് ഇവിടെ വിട്ടു പോകാം, മകളുമായിട്ട് പോകാം. Rudolph senses that കാര്യം തലയിലാകും. Rudolph senses that Emma is getting more and more needy and tedious and he is getting bored with Emma. So, he agrees, ശരി ബാഗ് ഒക്കെ പാക്ക് ചെയ്തോളൂ, നമുക്ക് ഇന്ന് രാത്രി പോകാം. അങ്ങനെ എമ്മ ബാഗ് ഒക്കെ പാക്ക് ചെയ്യാനിരിക്കുന്നു. അന്ന് വൈകിട്ട് തന്നെ he writes a letter accusing himself and runs away. So Emma is shocked to realize that Rudolph has abandoned her. ആ ഒരു ഷോക്കില് Emma goes through a physical and mental breakdown. So Charles അതൊന്നും അറിയുന്നില്ല. So he takes care of his wife patiently and slowly nurses her to health. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ ഭാര്യ okay ആയ ശേഷം one day they go to a theater in Rouen, and this is where Emma meets Leon a second time. ഇത്തവണ the plates have changed. Leon has spent his time in Paris. He's come off as a very sophisticated person, and he looks at Emma as rather unsophisticated. Meanwhile, Emma is happy she meets Leon. She's immediately interested, and again they start an affair. So poor Charles. അപ്പോൾ ഭർത്താവിനോട് പിയാനോ ലെസൺസ് ഉണ്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് പിയാനോ ലെസൺസിലെ കാശ് വാങ്ങി എല്ലാ വീക്കെൻഡിലും Emma goes off to Paris to see Leon in a hotel room, and they spend their weekend enjoying themselves in a hotel room, lavish weekend. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ Emma starts her second affair. But like I said, soon Leon and Emma start to get bored with each other. അപ്പോൾ അവിടെ ബോറടിക്കാൻ തുടങ്ങി. ഇതിനിടയ്ക്കാണ് if there is a villain, but actually the only villain in this novel is basically romance novel. ഇതിനിടയ്ക്കാണ് Monsieur Lerox. Now Lerox is a merchant, ഒരു money lender കൂടെയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ എമ്മ loves shopping. ഇത് മാത്രമല്ല, she spends a lot of money on it. പുള്ളിക്കാരി സ്വയം കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, because I'm trapped in this terrible marriage, I have every right to enjoy myself. അങ്ങനെ she keeps on buying things and Lerox encourages her. ഇപ്പൊ വേണ്ട, കട്ടായിട്ട് മതി. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ ഒരുപാട് ആവുമ്പോഴേക്കും ഡെപ്റ്റ് ഒരുപാട് കൂടി വരുമ്പോഴേക്കും Lerox forces her to get power of attorney. അങ്ങനെ എമ്മ persuades her husband to get a power of attorney. അത് കൊണ്ടുവന്ന് Leroxന് കൊടുക്കും. ക്രമേണ she is covered in debt, so much so that there is a court order for her to give back money. പലിശ സഹിതം. അപ്പോ എമ്മയുടെ കൊടുക്കാനൊന്നുമില്ല. So she goes to her lovers one by one to borrow some money. പക്ഷേ even Leon is bored with Emma now. അപ്പോ എമ്മയുടെ ഇൻഡിസ്ക്രിഷൻസിൽ സ്വന്തം പേര് ചീത്തയാകുമെന്ന് പേടിച്ച് ആരും സംരക്ഷിക്കാൻ തയ്യാറുമില്ല. അവസാനം Emma realizes that she has been abandoned by everyone and there is nothing she could do. അങ്ങനെ Emma goes to a shop, buys arsenic and commits suicide. Now, another key character in this novel is Monsieur Homais. ഈ നോവലിന്റെ കഥയിൽ ഡയറക്റ്റ് പാട്ടില്ലാത്ത എന്നാൽ ത്രൂ ഔട്ട് നിറഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്ന ഒരു ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സിൽ ഒരാളാണ് Homais. The Homais is symbolic of all the bourgeois characters that Flaubert hated. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ നോവലില് it's Emma who does all these things, but you kind of understand why Emma did this, because she's trapped in a marriage with a man who does not understand her. She has lost part of her identity. She has this illusion about what life is like, so she refuses to accept reality. അതൊക്കെ എമ്മയുടെ ഫോളിയാണെന്ന് പറയാം. But you also cannot help but understand her nature. Emma is a born romantic, just like Flaubert himself. Being a born romantic, Emma loves to live life, loves to enjoy life, loves all the good things in life. This is what sets her apart from all the bourgeoisie people around her, but also what dooms her. The ideal bourgeois family തൊട്ടപ്പുറത്തെ neighbors ആണ് the Homais family. Monsieur Homais is an apothecary and he has a very beautiful wife and his herd of children, and they prosper. Madame Bovery and Bovery's family തകരുന്തോറും the Homais family prosper. Now he is what Flaubert called the stupid bourgeoisie, the labestine. The bourgeoisie who read a lot of newspaper, who knows a lot of things but understands nothing. Sensibility ഇല്ലാത്ത, കാര്യങ്ങൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു സെൻസിബിലിറ്റി ഇല്ലാത്ത, എന്നാൽ സ്വയം ഒരു മോഡേൺ മാൻ ആണെന്ന് കരുതുന്ന ധാരാളം നോളജ് ഉള്ള ഒരാളാണ് Homais. Now, one of the major themes of the novel, primarily this is a novel of the study of human stupidity and romantic malady. So, this is the tragedy of what happens when you read too much romantic novels and have too much delusions about what life could be instead of accepting what life is. This is also a novel about a woman's quest for freedom and power. Marriage trapped by a lady and what she does to escape. This is also one of the central themes is also this conflict between desire and dissatisfaction. Emma desires too many things and is too dissatisfied with what she has. But above all, it also captures the bourgeoisie life as it is and the failures of bourgeoisie lifestyle. For himself or the bourgeoisie, he accepts that the bourgeoisie are successful. They invented railways, stream chart, they invented capitalism. And plus but at the same time they lack refinement and sophistication, they lack sensibility. വളരെ stupid ആയിട്ടുള്ള idiotic ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഗ്രൂപ്പാണ് bourgeoisie കാണുന്നത്. But he also knows in this world only the bourgeoisie can. Okay, so these are the basic themes of the novel. Now, I suggest that I recommend that you read this novel. Like I said, ഇത് വളരെ ബേസിക് ഒരു സമ്മറി മാത്രമാണ്. One of the key beauty of this novel is its beautiful style. So what Frober has done is taken a very ordinary story, a very mundane, ordinary, everyday life, and he has transformed it into an aesthetic way. So, Frober ശരിക്കും കാണിക്കുന്നത് shows the mirror of what life was like. And അതിനെ എന്താ പറയാ വളരെ വിവിഡ് ആയിട്ട് വളരെ ഡീറ്റെയിൽഡ് ആയിട്ട് എന്നാൽ വളരെ ന്യൂട്രൽ ആയിട്ട് ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ഈ ക്യാപ്ചേഴ്സ് ദ ബ്യൂട്ടി ഓഫ് ലൈഫ് as well as the cruelty of it, the banal, the mundane, and the beauty of life. അതിനെ ഭംഗിയായിട്ട് ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് Frober's style is very, very, very important. Like I said, വളരെ ന്യൂട്രലായി നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് ആരെയും കണ്ടം ചെയ്യാതെ, എന്നെ particularly കണ്ടം ചെയ്യാതെ, എന്നാൽ ഒരു ഫുൾ അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡിങ്ങോട് കൂടെ പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയും. It said that his French is so good that no English translation could truly capture that beauty. It's total, but still, it's a very good read. So I say Emma is a book on boredom. I'm not saying this is a book, very boring book, but this is a book about boredom. Boredom in everyday life, boredom in marriage. And I believe every marriage, I'm not sure if you agree with me, but every marriage has its degree of boredom, its degree of mundanity. And, Emma is a woman who's trapped in that boredom. Women's magazines and romance novels പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു ലോകം, അത് അവളുടെ ലോകമാക്കാനുള്ള എമ്മയുടെ കുറെ ശ്രമങ്ങളാണ് എം എ ലെവൽ കൊണ്ടെത്തിക്കുന്നത്. She tries to do all the home decorations. She tries to dress like what women's magazine told her was fashionable. She tries to be something that she sees in women's magazine and romance novels. നമ്മൾ സിനിമയിലും സീരിയലിലും കൊറിയൻ ഡ്രാമയിലൊക്കെ കാണുന്നത് പോലെ ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത് പോലെയാണ് എമ്മ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. Ultimately, it led to her doom and her husband's doom. But interestingly, ഇതൊക്കെ കാണിക്കുമ്പോഴും you kind of understand Emma because like I said, you have this that's വളരെ ബിഗിനിങ്ങിൽ പറഞ്ഞൊരു കാര്യമുണ്ട്. You can be a woman who destroys your family, who cheats on your husband, and still be not a bad person. Emma is not a bad person. She's just delusional. She believes in the illusions of romance, and that's why she did all these things. That's so great about this book. And the Viking book, despite what she does, you understand why she did all these things, and you actually feel pity for her. And I wonder, if 21st century I would have asked her to read this novel, and maybe she could have got her life back. So thanks to realism and thanks to Frober, maybe this book by initiating this movement of realism, he was showing his way to future Emmas that this is reality and you have to accept reality, otherwise you'll end up being another Emma.